Curt Cignetti and Indiana football have made moves this offseason, but have the expectations risen after a college football playoff berth a year ago?
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, and it is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. Appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. And joining me on the Locked On Hoosiers podcast, a little crossover edition as Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football is with us today. My man, there's so much to get to, and the Hoosiers have quietly made all sorts of moves throughout the offseason after a college football playoff berth a year ago. I have to keep reminding people of that. They seem to have forgotten this crazy idea. So we're going to rank Indiana and Curt Cignetti where they are in the Big Ten, a little power rankings a little bit later, plus what those expectations are for 2025. But I've talked about all offseason, the transfer portal additions that Indiana has made, they cannot be overlooked.
Yeah, it's a huge part of everybody's roster at some point, and I am glad to see it's not a Colorado level. Certainly Indiana is heavier in the portal than your average Power 4 college football team. I am curious to see how their high school recruiting evolves over the next couple of years as they, build up a brand, which is a huge, I love that hoodie, by the way. A huge part of, I just noticed the Indiana logo as I was talking, and I was like, oh, that's actually cool. So, your brand is a big part of how you're able to go out and recruit on the trail. Why do we see the same teams, near the top of the recruiting rankings every year? Brand power. Yes, money is a part of it, but why do the best players want to go play for Alabama, Georgia, Oregon, Texas, Notre Dame, whoever else, USC? Because they've got the brand for it. So I think at some point that will have to be a focus for Indiana if they want to sustain long-term conference championship contending level success in the Big Ten. But right now, man, it worked a lot last year. It worked phenomenally. Remember that time that Indiana was getting dogged on because of how badly Notre Dame was beating them, and then they wound up with the smallest margin of defeat of any team in the playoff. Hang the banner. No, I'm kidding. But no, of course you start with Fernando Mendoza when it comes to the portal moves. I like the Pat Coogan edition. Personally, I am a sucker for the big fellas. The trench play is so important, and it's not as flashy. I've got another show here at the network where I talk about one team in particular, and that being Oregon, of course. And when you add a new quarterback, big content. You add a new receiver, big new. Everybody's buzzing about that. Yeah, an offensive lineman. Oh, nice, cool. Yeah,
well, Indiana fans were pumped because of how the playoff went. I mean, I talked about when Pat Coogan committed and two other offensive linemen, one from Ohio State, one from Colorado. And it's like Christmas came early. It was exciting news because of how the playoff game went last year and how the Ohio State game went last year too.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at the top teams in the Big Ten and the sorts of defensive lines they can generate, just look at last year alone. Your three best defensive lines were probably in this order: Ohio State 1, Oregon, Michigan, kind of tight. Probably Michigan, Michigan a slight edge, and then Oregon 3. And if you're looking at that conference ranking of defensive lines and saying Oregon's got the third best defensive line, they just had three guys drafted in the first 3 rounds. One of them in the first round, Derek Harmon to the Steelers, 21st overall. So when you consider that's something that is always present in this conference. Not that offensive lines don't matter in every league. They do. I can't look at the Big 12 or the ACC, especially the Big 12, and say it matters as much. I think what you're seeing in those conferences, you look at a school like Texas Tech, for instance, who I think should be the favorite in the Big 12 going into this season. One of the reasons I feel that way is you don't have a ton of high-end offensive lines in the Big 12. And what they have done for their defensive line, bringing in Romello Height from Georgia Tech, David Bailey from Stanford, they have bolstered their trench play, and they've brought in other guys too. And so the Big Ten, has that reputation, that brand of we're it's the big 10, right? The Big 12 is like, woohoo, we're throwing the ball, it's fun, it's a great conference. I love it. But the Big 10 is smash mouth, cold weather. I think it's overblown to an extent. There is a lot of truth to that narrative, that idea of, hey, you're seeing high-end defensive linemen. Abdul Carter and Mason Graham and Derek Harmon just came out of this conference in the first round of the NFL draft. In the same draft. There are not a lot of other conferences that can do that. So I'm glad to hear Indiana fans appreciate the importance of that offensive line, because if you don't have a good one, ask Washington how that went last year. They gave up 10 sacks to Oregon at Autzen Stadium, and their young, talented quarterback, Damon Williams, had no chance. He had absolutely no chance. So that's what you can run into. I like that Indiana fans appreciate the big boys.
And that's just on the offensive side between Roman Hemby or Fernando Mendoza, or the offensive guys up front. Holden Stays, the Tennessee tight end, who's going to be your starter. Mikulski's the Wisconsin tight end, who's going to be your backup. But then you look on the defensive side, Spencer, where Indiana brings back 2 All-Americans and another one who can compete. You have D'Angelo Pons in the secondary, Aiden Fisher in the linebacker spot, and Michael Kamara, who's going to be coming off the edge. Indiana didn't need as much in the transfer portal defensively, but they still got them. Guys like Amarian Knighton from NIU, love that kid. You get a cornerback from Pitt. You get linebackers from Maryland. You get players on the defensive side where Indiana already had some starters. They just kind of built some depth, which is a crazy idea in Bloomington. But now there is some depth on the defensive side of the football, which in the Big Ten, you got to have.
And I think that as a head coach progresses throughout his tenure, you start to see that become better if things are going in the right direction. I think that's one of the areas when you're evaluating a coach and his staff's talent acquisition is, hey, you should go into any given season and feel this is a deeper team. There is more proven production. There is more of an ability to survive an injury. There's just more high-end players everywhere that you look. It doesn't usually happen overnight. It can happen a lot quicker in today's world with the transfer portal than it used to, because this used to be, an incredible season like the one Cignetti had was literally as good of a coach as he is before COVID and before the portal. It was literally impossible because they did it with so many guys that came with him from James Madison, and Curtis Rourke came over from Ohio. That wasn't you could have gotten a couple maybe. I think Rourke could have been a graduate transfer, but everybody else wouldn't have been there. You wouldn't have had an 11-1 season. Maybe you would have been really good. Maybe you wouldn't have been 11-1 though. And I think that the ability to adapt to a new era is a really good sign. But that you're going into a season feeling, hey, this is a deeper, better team. That's the same. It's the same principle of progression that you had when it was only high school recruiting and there was no transfer portal, save for 1 or 2 grad transfers that maybe came over in a given cycle. That used to take a lot more time, and now you can do it quicker. But there should still be that evaluation for someone like you as the Locked On Hoosiers host year over year, saying, hey, does this team look like a better version of itself with more talent than what they had the year before?
And if it is better than what it was a year before, that means Indiana not just makes the college football playoff, but wins their game or two. What are the expectations for 2025 in Bloomington for Curt Cignetti and the Hoosiers? We talk about that next here with Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football and a crossover edition of Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Game Time. It is that time for the NBA playoffs. There's nothing like it. And the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live. And this year's matchups are already delivering. You've got upsets happening all over the place. You've got Boston losing their best player. You've got the West going nuts. It's insane. And if you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually go down closer to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. I use it every time I'm going to an event. Sports, music, comedy, theater, you name it. I use it on Game Time. My grandparents use Game Time. If they can do it, you can do it too, I promise. You can use the app and see your view from your seat. The prices go down. They actually have a feature with all-in pricing, so you never have to guess on what the price is going to be for your ticket. So you're going to find great seats for as low as $100 right now with exclusive discounts. Use that right now on Game Time by downloading the app, creating an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we continue with Locked On Hoosiers, Locked On College Football. And a year ago was magical, Spencer. It was the best season in the history of Indiana football. It could go down as the all-time greatest season if things don't get back to that point. So what are realistic expectations for those on the outside, since you're the host of Locked On College Football? What are realistic expectations from a non-Indiana person, from non-Hoosiers glasses, right? Realistic expectations in 2025 with Curt Cignetti, the roster they have, and the schedule that the Hoosiers will play this year too.
Be a good team, compete for a playoff spot.
Okay.
Notice I did not say make the playoff.
Make it. Yeah.
I'm sure there are plenty of Hoosier fans that'll say, I'm setting the bar too low. Hear me out. When you have been a program historically like Indiana has, last year is exciting for so many reasons. You're going to have a chance to go up against the big boys, a chance to play in the playoff. I mean, you had, a big time game with College game day in attendance for Ohio State. Then you had a playoff game at Notre Dame. Just getting there and what it takes to get there is indeed an accomplishment in and of itself. And I'm not trying to tell you as an Indiana fan to go out and say, well, now let's just go back to being a bowl team every year. No. That's not my point. But when you've been a program that has been down, as Indiana has been for my entire life, save for the COVID year.
Is it fair to say down, because that implied that you were up? And I'm saying that as the Indiana.
I'm down towards the bottom of the sport. Like
okay.
They were a bottom dweller my whole life, which is what made last year so incredible. When you have been that and you have an incredible season, to then expect you just go to the play and suddenly you're expecting to do what the Ohio States and by the way, Alabama missed the playoff this past year. But Ohio State or Notre Dame or Clemson or, like all of these schools that get there every year. No one gets to the playoff every single year. In the 12-team era, sure, it's slightly different. But you have to understand there is a recalibration of expectations, but it can't be all the way up to the top where you're suddenly expecting we should be right there with Ohio State every single year. We should be in the playoff every single no. Respectfully, no, that's not a thing. I'll give you an example from my own personal fandom outside of college football, which I don't even have. I'm neutral arbiter, of course. But I'm a Seattle Mariners fan, diehard. So thank you. I appreciate that because it sucks. I love them and I love having baseball back, but it sucks. Anyway, when I was growing up, they were terrible. And then all of a sudden, in 2014, they signed Robinson Cano to this big contract. I could not believe my eyes reading that headline. I knew exactly where I was. I remember to this day, I was walking out the door of Miss Mitchell's B1 English class in high school. I saw the news and I turned to my friend John and said, "Did you see this?" He was like, "What?" They signed Robinson Cano. I'm like, oh my gosh. I was freaking out. In that first year, the Mariners won, I think it was 78-ish games or so. Like they were close. They were closer than they really had been for most of my life when they had this big playoff draft. So I didn't expect them right when they made that acquisition to get to the playoffs right away. I was excited that they took a major step forward. And then after several years of getting really close, like 2 to 3, it was, okay, now that you've proven you can sustain this level and you weren't just a flash in the pan or catching lightning in a bottle, now I can go into a season and expect, as I did in 2018, they should make the playoffs. And when that didn't happen, then they triggered a reset and all that sort of stuff. And they eventually broke their 21-year playoff drought in the 2022 campaign. It was a long time. It was so worth it, though, for that moment when Cal Raleigh hit a home run. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. One of the best moments of my life as a sports fan and just in general. When they made that breakthrough moment and got to the playoffs for the first time in 21 years, I had never consciously, that I can remember, seen them go to the playoffs. When they did that, I went into that playoff saying, I have no expectation here. They won a wild card series. They lost to Houston. Yep, it stunk losing to the Astros. Frankly, I didn't care a ton. I was like, you know what? This was great. So
you were just happy to be there.
Just happy to be there. And there is something to that. You don't just burst onto the scene and go win a national championship. Go look at the 10 years of Georgia football that preceded their 2 national championships in a row. Go look at the 15 years. No, sorry. Look at the 11 years, 11 years or so that preceded Ohio State winning this past season's national championship. You don't just get there and then all of a sudden you can win it. Like, there's a lot that goes into it. So that's where my expectations are. I expect them to be a good team. 8.5, I think, is a really good win total. If they go under that, I don't think it's a disaster. If they go out and, maybe start 5-1, but end up 7-5, yeah, it'd be a little disappointing if you get off that hot start. But overall, like, if they win 7-8 games, I won't view it as some massive flop. If they win 10 games, they're probably back in the playoff because their schedule is a lot tougher than it was last year. But you proved something last year. But to be all the way up at the top of the sport, a lot more still has to be proven.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the fans are, is there's a small group that was just happy to be there, old school IU fans who watched the football team be miserable forever. There was a group of the fans, and still are, of, oh, we should be there every year because Curt Cignetti's awesome, which he is. But I think a lot of the fans are in that category of, okay, just don't have a major drop. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that great? Cignetti, baby.
Cignetti. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, smoke some cigs and win some games. That's what he does. And so there's a lot of fans that are in that category of, okay, be competitive, don't have a major drop off, and give yourself a chance. My argument that I've had on Locked On Hoosiers is give yourself a chance going into November, which is how you led this segment by saying have a shot at the college football playoff. And Spencer, you look at the schedule, you say it's much harder than it is last year, or than it was last year, which is true, but it's not all that difficult. You're going to start 3-0 because all your cupcake games are at the start, which I think is totally infuriating, but it's fine.
Remind me of the first 3.
Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State.
All right. First of all, the alma mater of Larry Bird is not to be slept upon.
Or the Monarchs of Old Dominion.
I was about to say, Old Dominion, you got to watch it. You ask Virginia Tech how easy it is to play Old Dominion.
Or Hootie Hoo with Kennesaw State. I mean, there's a lot going on with those 3 games.
Yeah, that'll be 3-0.
But Indiana's going to be fine. You host Illinois, which could come down to being a massive game of Big Ten standings by the end of the season if Illinois becomes what they're supposed to be. You do go to Iowa City, and you do have to play the Hawkeyes on the road. I'm not worried about it, but could be tough. Then we have to, go to Eugene, Oregon. Then we get to play Michigan State.
I heard it's a cool place.
Yeah, I think it's okay. Indiana's got a great shot. Hosting Michigan State, hosting UCLA, to Maryland, to Penn State, hosting Wisconsin, and then at Purdue. I just don't think the schedule's all that bad. I really, really don't.
Well, here's the thing, and this is why I say expectations should be battling for competing for a playoff spot. At Penn State, at Oregon.
It's brutal. It's tough.
That's it. I mean, that's almost as brutal as it gets. Like your premier programs in the Big Ten are the reigning champs, the reigning national champs, and then before that, the champs before that, season, that being Michigan that I'm referring to. Then you've got Penn State in the full, and I'm talking brand power-wise, not 2025 power rankings. But if you look at those 4 programs, and I think we can confidently say, we'll get into this more later, those are the 4 best programs in the last 5 years in the Big Ten. Going back, and Oregon's had time in the Big 12 or in the Pac-12 as well. Big 12, goodness, my realignment brain is broken. But Pac-12, RIP. But Those are the top 4. To play 2 of them and they're both on the road, that's pretty tough. You compare that to what Oregon has. They play 1. It's on the road at Penn State. Brutal. But obviously they can't play themselves. But they don't play Ohio State. They don't play Michigan because they played them last year.
They play Indiana, though. Yeah, they do.
They play Indiana.
They
do play Indiana. This is true. This is a true statement of things that will happen.
Yeah, you're right. Indiana's coming to Eugene, baby. You have those 2 games. Even if the Hoosiers lose both of those and they lose another game at Iowa, but you win all the other ones, you're still 9-3. You still go over your win total projection, and you're still at least in the conversation for a college football playoff. I think that's
which is my point.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my point. Is if you find a way, because at Iowa is not to be slept upon. It is in no way to be slept on. That is a great environment. It's a good team. I don't know if it's a great team. I think it's probably not. But it's a good team. It's a good program with a great defense and an offense that also exists. But it's a tough place to play. Teams better than 2025 Indiana have gone to Kinnick Stadium and lost before.
That's fair. Well, I think it sounds like the majority of college football kind of has the same idea as the majority of the Indiana fan base, which is just be competitive, no major drop-off, have a say in November. That's a realistic expectation for what could happen in 2025. But another question that we need to pose and we need to debate is, where does Indiana rank in Big Ten power rankings, along with Curt Cignetti as a head coach in the Big Ten? We talk about that next here on Locked On Hoosiers and Locked On College Football Crossover. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Wayfair. The days are getting longer. The weather is already warm, and people are spending more time than outside, which means it's the perfect time to refresh your outdoor space. Whether you're working with a big backyard or a small balcony on your apartment, Wayfair has everything you need to make it feel more like you. Wayfair's massive selection of outdoor essentials makes it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. From comfy conversation sets to sleek dining tables and outdoor decor, they've got it all, and at prices that fit your budget. You can get a new patio dining set or mix up different styles, and all of that is free delivery and no hassle with that delivery for even the big stuff like a couch or a table or chairs. Doesn't matter. They're going to get it to you for free and you don't have to worry about it. Shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online this summer. Get outside with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, final segment here of a Locked On crossover, Indiana Hoosiers, college football, Locked On Hoosiers, Locked On college football. I'm Jacob Goins. He is Spencer McLaughlin. And we started looking at Big Ten power rankings heading into 2025. Now, I'm curious, Spencer, do you subscribe to the idea of washing out everything that happened a year ago and just looking at what to expect in 2025? Or do you let that kind of trickle into your power rankings?
Well, it depends on how similar a team is going to be from the prior year. I mean, Ohio State and Oregon are incredibly talented rosters. They are not the same teams. Yeah. They just had, I think, a combined 24 players drafted. Oregon just set a record with 10 players drafted. That's a record for their school. I think Ohio State had like 14 selected total. So that's a lot. And by the way, the number of players you lost is not limited to the guys that got drafted. Those were just the best players that got drafted. Oregon is replacing a quarterback, a running back, 2 tight ends, 4 offensive linemen, 3 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and 6 members of the secondary.
You're really knowledgeable about them.
Yeah, I am indeed. I got a guy.
How many players is Purdue replacing?
Unimportant.
For their sake, I hope all.
Oh, well, they're replacing a lot. Barry Odom is turning things over. That's kind of the idea. But for Ohio State, you lost 3 guys along the defensive line. You lost, I think, 2 linebackers, a couple members of the secondary, a receiver who was selected, late in the first round, early second, Emeka Ibuka, and both your running backs and your quarterback and several members of your offensive line. Yeah. That's a lot. I think it matters when you're evaluating the quality of a coaching staff to say, what did they do the prior year? Like, if I were to grade, total coaching jobs last year in the Big Ten, Indiana would be up there. Like, certainly what Dan Lanning did at Oregon winning the Big Ten, very impressive. What Ryan Day did winning national championship, very impressive. They also have the talent rosters on paper to do that. Indiana shouldn't have been 11-1 and as dominant as they were. So I think you have to grade the staff very highly after what they did a year ago. But if we're talking power rankings here, my number one team is Penn State. There is no way. Here's the crazy thing. I know it sounds wild, Jacob. It does. It feels wrong. It's just like, oh, it's James Franklin.
It definitely feels wrong.
It feels wrong. But if I were to create a graphic or write out a tweet thread or anything, and I gave you Team A, Team B, and Team C,
okay,
I guarantee you all would pick Penn State. I guarantee it. There is no way, unless you knew what the discussion was and you wanted to pick Ohio State or Oregon just to be contrarian. But you would not, if you just looked objectively at all of this, you would not pick Ohio State or Oregon. You would pick Penn State. This is a school that was team, school, refer to it however you want. This is a team that is returning its head coach and its offensive coordinator, who was coveted for head coaching jobs, but wanted to stay as the OC for Penn State during the run. And by the way, that job was West Virginia. He would have been the West Virginia head coach, not Rich Rodriguez, but he decided, no, I want to stay with Penn State. So you bring back...
That's just for the story of college football. Rich Rod, baby.
Yeah, it is. I know. I'm glad Rich Rod is back at West Virginia. But you bring back one of the 5 best, maybe one of the 3 best offensive coordinators in all of college football. You have a team that has a top 10, I believe, returning production metric in all college football. You have a 2026 projected top 10 pick at quarterback. You have 2 running backs. You return 4 starters along the offensive line. And you just brought in the defensive coordinator from Team B in this hypothetical, who was instrumental to winning a national championship. There is no way. You went out and brought in an all-conference receiver from Syracuse to help fill a void left by receivers that were substandard a year ago. Oh, and you brought in a guy from USC who was a great player for the Trojans last season. Oh, and you brought in a guy from Troy who could be Tez Johnson round 2.
Okay, Penn State's good. Fine, they're good.
Yeah, they should be great. They should be great.
They should be, but James Franklin's still their head coach. So I assume that it's going to be Penn State 1 for you, Ohio State 2, Oregon 3.
Yeah.
Who's your 4th? And tell me why Indiana's 5.
I got this written down.
I'm so proud of you.
Want to make sure I stay consistent here. I got my.
I'm proud of you.
I got my notes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You're not gonna believe. I have Indiana 5th.
I guessed it right. Tell me why. Tell me why they're 5th as we
I have Indiana 5th because of the coaching staff and because I do like some of their portal moves.
Okay.
I in particular Pat Coogan. I think Mendoza is solid, but this is more faith in the coaching staff and the continuity that they have maintained. Coaching continuity is a hard thing to find, and I've been consistent about this on my show for a very, very long time. That if you have coaching continuity, one of the reasons that I'm leaning towards my preseason national title pick being Clemson, they return their offensive coordinator, quarterback, and coach for a 3rd straight year. Nobody else in college football can say that. Not that it is a Power 4 school. There is not another Power 4 school in the country who has the same combination of those 3 guys, which I value, and is trying to win a national championship. I don't think that it exists out there. But who do you think my 4th team is? Power rated in the Big Ten.
That's such a good. If you say,
I'll give you a hint. They also have a high level of returning production.
If you tell me, like other people I've seen, that it's Illinois, I'm going to scream.
All right, well then go ahead and scream because it's Illinois.
Oh no,
it's Illinois.
Oh,
what do you not like? They lost the running back to Georgia, Josh McCray. All right, don't love that, but running backs far more replaceable in other spots. I've got a veteran quarterback in Luke Altmaier. I've got Brett Bielema, who just put up a 10-win season, by the way, and exclamation pointed it with a win over the SEC. Remember that discussion we all had about the playoff and, I'd put in 9-3 South Carolina over 11-1 Indiana. Schedule's garbage, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's a team that Illinois beat in their bowl game. And a lot of that team is back. I believe the Illini are top 5 nationally in returning production. And I like Luke Altmaier. He's not incredible, but he's more proven than most of the other quarterbacks in the Big Ten. Yeah. It's like if you do a Big Ten power ranking of quarterbacks, Jacob, you wind up putting Drew Aller number 1 because everywhere, unless you're going to put Luke Altmaier number 1, you can't look at Dylan Raiola and say he's number 1. You can't put Bryce Underwood right there. You can't.
Mendoza's up there though. I think Mendoza needs to be up there.
Yeah, he's solid. You're not putting him number 1.
No, not yet. Not yet.
That Kurt Signetti confidence is contagious, isn't
it? It's almost sickening. Yeah, it's almost like it's a drug, right? And how it's not supposed to do that, but hey, that's what's happening here. Okay, so you got Indiana at 5. That's good enough. That means, look, Signetti and the Hoosiers, good expectations and solid power ranking, and a lot of good portal additions. Indiana's poised for another good season. All they have to do is compete for a college football playoff. And if they compete, not saying they have to make it, just compete, everything will be fine in 2025. That'll at least get us to basketball season where we have a new head coach and everything will be just fine. So, Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On College Football. I'm Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you all being a part of another crossover edition. Until next time, stay safe, and we'll talk to you later.